All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I'm your host, Quan. I go by Q. Where being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. And on this episode of Mediocre Dads, I am joined by an awesome guest. And this is why it's awesome, right? Because it's another service member. And anytime I could get talked to another service member, our conversations will probably get out of hand. And only in a good way. In a good way. I know you're laughing, but in a good way, our conversations probably get out of hand because when there's a pause in the conversation, we can always go back to just dumping on the military, even though we love the military.
Yeah.
And this is not by any means a representation of the DoD. I should say that before we get started, just in case some people get upset because military people, especially old heads, like he mentioned before we were talking, old heads, they get upset when you just jump on the military. I actually got a bad NCOER once because she was like, "You said the Army was terrible," and I was like, "Well, I mean, it kind of is." And she was like,
Yeah.
"Well, you shouldn't say that in front of the soldiers." I was like, "Okay, fair point. However, they agree with me." So,
If that's like a one-time occurrence, why is it going on an NCOER? Like if she just like walked past and heard you like saying to a soldier like, "Hey man, the Army can sometimes screw you over," and she's like, "That's it, your entire NCR is."
it was a crazy thing. We had to go back and forth several times. She sent it to me, and I sent it back to her. Said some corrections before I sign this. So anyway, guys. So we're just gonna kind of dive right into it. Since you've already seen him, you already heard him talk. But his name is Devin Hawley. He is a service member. I don't know where you're stationed at. I don't know if you want to tell people where you're stationed at, but
I'm in beautiful Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. I've been living in paradise.
Stuck on an island. Couldn't be me. Listen, I told Young this. I was like, because he loves Hawaii, obviously, because he's from there. But I was like, hey, man, I could only imagine being stuck on an island for like 3 years. I could barely imagine that. But being stuck on an island your entire life, yeah, couldn't be me. I don't mind visiting, but then to say, hey, you have to live here for 3 years, no, I'm good. I'll go anywhere else. I'll choose Alaska before I go to Hawaii. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I will. Anyway.
I mean, it's not so unpopular if you're from there.
Well, yeah. So Young, yeah, but he loves. Are you from Hawaii too?
No, I'm from Alaska though.
You're from Alaska, man. I just chose Alaska.
So it's not an unpopular opinion for me.
Listen, I just chose Alaska because it's just one of the duty assignments that most people don't usually like.
Trust me, you're out in the middle of nowhere, so it's the same concept. I understand. I understood the point you were trying to make. Yeah. It is out in the middle of nowhere.
So Alaska, really, guys, I didn't know that. I promise. I just happened to say Alaska, and he happened to be from there. So, but anyway, before we get into it, Devin, can you just kind of real quick introduce yourself to the audience and let them know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Sergeant Devin Hawley. I'm a combat medic in the Army. Been in for almost 7 years. It'll be 7 years here just after July 4th. July 5th is my anniversary because obviously MEPS isn't open on July 4th, so I wanted something I could remember. I've got married and I have one son. I'm currently over here at Schofield Barracks with one of the infantry units. I love medicine. I love being in the Army. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I love being a dad. It's probably tied there for being the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm super excited to talk about being a dad and being a service member. I've had a buddy of mine, Young, if you guys watch the podcast, or if this isn't your first episode, you know who that is. If not, go and look up that episode. He's a buddy of mine I worked with in Korea, and I found out about this from him, and I'm super excited to be here. And I love talking to people and sharing experiences, because a lot of times we think we're the only ones going through something. And then turns out we're not, because as special as we like to think we are, the human experience is not something that's specifically yours. Everybody's been through at least something.
Oh, yeah. That's freaking awesome. So you were stationed with Young in Korea, which, by the way, guys, yes, I appreciate the plug, man. So if you haven't seen that episode with me and Young, I don't know what number episode it was, but I promise, go check it out. Young really, he opens up, and it's one of those episodes where I appreciate someone opening up and just being able to, word vomit, if you will, their experience and essentially almost without any shame, because he he was
Yeah.
smiling and laughing throughout the entire time. Obviously, there were some points where you could tell he would the memory was running through his head. But overall, at the end of the episode, it was a good episode and a good conversation, and something that uh, I know some people didn't like, because especially the person in question that we were talking about. I
Yep.
know that person did not like it. But sometimes those are tough conversations, and it's not meant for everybody. But that being said, Devin, so let's start with some easy things. So you're a dad, and I think you said your son is a year and a half here, or
Yep.
coming up to a year and a half. So let's go back. Okay, let's go back. When you were coming up, what was your dad like? What was your family and that upbringing?
So I grew up in a 5 kid household.
Damn.
And very lower middle class. And Alaska is expensive as far as living's concerned. So not a lot of money. I remember one time for Christmas, the only thing I asked for Christmas was a pair of jeans without holes in them. So we were like that far off, as far as financially goes. My dad worked on the North Slope, on the oil rigs for Halliburton, for quite a long time. Uh, and that put a really big strain on our family dynamic and my parents' marriage. And then eventually my parents got divorced when I was in around middle school, around 13, 12 years old. And my dad had to go through a lot of soul searching because he was married really young. And that's a really big change to have in a man's life, to essentially not necessarily lose his family, but lose your family and your marriage, and
Mm,
try to figure out who you are outside of that. Because he didn't have any other life experiences outside of that, being my father and being my mom's husband.
yeah.
And it took him a long time to become the man he is today, who I proudly say is my father. And he had his ups and downs, and he made his mistakes. Uh, my dad was always like, he was always working because he knew that's what he needed to do for himself to survive and his kids to survive. And he was okay with that
Yeah.
sometimes taking a toll on our relationship. And I resent him a lot for it. I understand him so much more now, especially with the kind of lifestyle we live in the military and the relationships we have to have with our kids and how we have to walk that line. But yeah, I grew up in a split home in my formative years, though, in those years that are super important, those teenage years where you're kind of figuring out who you are and who your siblings are, and you're starting to notice the real world and high school and love and everything that comes with being a teenager. So that was just another chip that was on my shoulder at that point in my life, and it took me a long time to figure out those feelings and what the real world looks like. And my parents splitting and me thinking, like, why don't my parents love each other, instead of thinking, or knowing that relationships fall apart even if it's the people who may still love each other. Sometimes it just doesn't work that way, and it was better for my parents to divorce than to try to stay happy or stay together for us.
Dang.
So yeah, that was what I grew up like. But other than that, I had a great childhood. I mean, both my parents instilled a lot of work ethic in us. Um, Even though we didn't have a lot of money, we were happy. I love all my siblings. I have great relationships with them. My oldest brother, was also in the Army. He was medically discharged about 4 or 5 years into his career. And then I'm so blessed to have a good family despite how rough things got for a long time. And my mom as well. My mom is like, if my dad's my dad, my mom is my second dad. My mom is such a tough woman. She's just like, I lived with my mom, and my dad taught me a lot, but as much as my dad taught me how to be a man, my mom taught me even more, which was really
Yeah.
cool, and I appreciate them both for how they raised us. But I had a pretty great childhood. I liked growing up where I grew up, and I'm glad to see where my family has come, even though it's a little fractured. A lot of people's
Yeah.
families are nowadays. So
Oh yeah. And so when you're kind of going back there to the beginning of part, what you said, when you mentioned that your parents split and you were like 12, 13 years old, what was that like
mhm.
for you emotionally, right? What was that? Was it just like a kind of like, this is, I have to accept this, or what was
Mhm.
that like? What was that experience like for you?
So it's kind of crazy to like look at our family specifically. If you have a family with like 1 to 2 children, you can kind of get a glimpse into it. But I think because we had so many kids in the family, you had the older 4 kids, myself, my 2 oldest brothers, and my younger sister is just behind me in age, and then I had a baby sister, Grace, and at the time she was a year and a half. So it was interesting to see like the difference in the reactions of that split in all my siblings. My oldest brother Jonah was on his way out the door, and he joined the army to get away from everything. My second
Yeah.
oldest brother, who's autistic, kind of just leaned into that, and he kind of like became internalized, and he plays a lot of video games, and he sat in his room in the dark all the time, and that's the way he processed his emotions. And my younger sister had one of those really gnarly teenage angst periods where she was like, I hate my parents and this and that, and I'm gonna go get piercings and I'm gonna drink underage. And so she had that. And then my baby sister, of course, had no idea what was going on because she's too young. And then you had me,
Yeah.
who I was just like, I love both my parents and I want to have both my parents. So when it came to things like custody, I was old enough to choose, and I told the judge, I want to live with my mom because that's where the rest of my siblings are, but I want to see my dad because I want both my siblings. That's all I care about. I had no want or care to hear about what my mom had to say about my dad, bad or good, or what my dad had to say about my mom, bad or good. I just wanted both my parents. So it's interesting to see through all the siblings and myself, like the swath of different emotions and like processes of that grief and that loss of that family, in all of us and how it affected us. And then we all turned out fine anyway. So,
Oh yeah, it's not to say that people turn out. I know for some people it kind of lives with them, and then for
hmm
others they're able to handle the receiving of the information, receive it, and kind of rationalize it and better than others. And but like I said in the beginning, some people it's almost one of those things that they never recover from, and it's one of those things that defines them forever.
yeah,
And when something such as that defines us, I think it puts us it leads us down a hole in which it's very difficult to get out of, because every relationship from that point on is defined by, if my parents could work out, then what in hell chance do I have of something working out for me? You know what I mean? And so
absolutely.
I always find it intriguing and extremely exciting, and it brings me a lot of joy when kids do come from a divorced family, but then they themselves are like, hey, I refuse to ever end up like my parents. Not to say that their parents are terrible people, but just in the sense of like, hey, I recognize that something happened. They got divorced, and no kid ever wants their parents to get divorced, but still, nonetheless, it's something that happened, and they want to be different. They don't want their
hmm
relationships to be defined by that moment, that moment in their life, or something that happened to their parents. So I think it's awesome, right? You have family, you have I'm sure a beautiful wife, and a beautiful son, a handsome son, I should say. Sorry, I say beautiful because I have two daughters, so it's
That's
always
all
the
right.
first word, descriptive word. But a handsome son, and so like I'm sure it's just that knowing your purpose in that life is it just brings you joy. So with from that point though, for with all your siblings, and obviously kind of went different directions, so I didn't know you could sit in front of the judge, or you would get an opportunity to sit in front of the judge and tell him like, hey, I want to go here, I want to go there. Before that decision, did you say to yourself, like, did you already have in your mind like, hey, I want to be with my mom, or was it, I want to be with my dad so bad, but I don't know what the right decision is?
Well, you got Well, so I was like I said, I was like 12, 13. So like, the brain's still developing, right? And to have those like
Yeah,
important cognitive decisions and to put a child in that position is kind of crappy. And that's one of those things that um, like one of those small things that happens that people don't think about. Not that it's necessarily your fault and that you should stay in a relationship that is bad. You shouldn't. But that's the kind of things that impact your children when you make those
hmm,
decisions. Um, I knew I wanted to live with my mom because that's where I was happy in the sense that that's where my school was. That's where all my friends were. That's where my hometown was. It was my childhood home. Like this was home, even without my father in it,
hmm,
who I did miss dearly, because he moved about an hour and a half away or so. Um, that was my
gotcha.
home. But like in some states and in some court cases, sometimes if the child is of age, because there's certain ages where they can pick based on the state, I'm pretty sure, they ask the
Yeah,
child or the teenager most of the time, like, who do you want to live with? Because sometimes the judge is cool enough and caring enough to be like, okay, mom's got issues with the dad's got issues with the moms, obviously, because they're divorcing. What does the kid want? And then I can make the decision as the judge of based on the character that the mom and dad have presented and based on what the kid wants, what is the best decision for the kid. And sometimes judges do a great job at that. Sometimes they don't. Unfortunately, we only hear about when they don't. We never hear about when they do. I think that's a problem. However, yeah, I kind of had
Yeah.
it in my mind. Like, I've always been mentally mature, in the sense that like I can have
Mm.
that cognitive thought. Now, don't get me wrong, I was an absolute goofball all my whole childhood, and I used to take jokes too far, and I used to joke at inopportune times. But I was also very a lot more intelligent emotionally than a lot of my siblings and a lot of my fellow students. Maybe a little too in touch with my emotions. So I was able to think
Mm.
about those things, even though I was 12, 13. I was like, listen, this is where everything I love is at. I'll visit my dad whenever I can, but I want to be with my mom. And that's how I came to that decision. And then, of course, I knew that even though as emotional as that could be, I had to put my emotions aside to have that thought. Whereas,
Mm.
like my siblings, the way they came to their decisions were a lot more emotional, and I understand that, and I don't blame them for it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot more emotional, or there was emotion on my side too. I was just everybody seemed like they were falling apart, and I took it on myself to be the one who was like, I'm gonna go up there and not look like someone killed my dog,
Yeah.
because I also felt like it was like a representation of my parents. Like when my siblings
Yeah.
went up and were sobbing and telling the judge this or that, or my parents were sobbing and being angry at each other in a court of law, like in front of God and everybody, I felt like it wasn't a good representation of the family that I'd come to know and the good family that I loved.
Mm.
So I felt like if I could go up there and be as calm, cool, collected, and well thought out as possible, even at the age of 12, 13, this judge who sat there, she wouldn't think that our family is just another one of those clusters, because it wasn't. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? There's some horrible families out there, and they have a lot of issues, and ours really didn't. It just, you make a big deal out of small things, and to everybody on the outside, that's
Yeah.
where I came up with that. But it was tough, man, at the age at that young to have to try to be the rock in the family. That put a lot of
Yeah.
stress on me, and I did a lot of crying in private. A lot of mentally. I guess I could identify it as like like teenage depression in private, but I was really good at hiding it because I'm just such an outgoing individual. I could hide it pretty well.
Yeah. Got you. Okay, so fast forward, right?
Mm.
You joined the army. What did you join the army because family, previous family, or you just were like, hey, I need to get out of here, or a mixture of both?
It wasn't getting out of there. I love Alaska. I've spent my whole career trying to go back, and those those they won't give you school and
They won't
everything,
give you
bro. Like, give it
Alaska?
to
Oh
me.
man.
I was like, I don't care if I go to an airborne unit. I don't care if I go to a pogue unit. You can send me to Wainwright in the middle of Fairbanks where it's cold as crap. I don't care. But they wouldn't give
Mm.
it to me. Anyways, so I had a grandfather who did 27 years, retired as
Oh, awesome.
a sergeant major, and then my brother was in as well. And me and my brother talked about joining the army when we were kids a little bit, and when my brother became an infantryman and my grandfather became an infantryman, I remember times where they were both gone. My grandpa did a lot of deployments because he was in from essentially the Gulf War all the way through the Surge and most of the GWAT, right? I thought,
Mm.
I love those two so much. If something ever happened to them, I don't know what I would do. So if I was going to join, I'm going to join and try to be the person who makes sure other people's brothers, grandparents, sisters, mothers, whatever, come home. So I was like, not only am I going to join, I'm going to be a medic. And I was flopping between corpsman and medic. And because corpsman, because I didn't have to do Marine boot camp, but I could do things with the Marines because I didn't want to go to Marine boot camp. That sounded insane.
Oh yeah.
But the Marine guys weren't there. They were doing something or something like that. So I walked to the Army office instead and was like, hey, I want to be a medic. And they're like, cool, take the ASVAB. And I was off and rolling, and probably took me maybe like 2 months because I had to lose a little bit of weight. But yeah, I joined. I joined kind of in response to my grandfather and my brother, but also because we were. Alaska is a very red state, and when you grow up in a red state, you have a very
Mm.
patriotic view of the country, right? And then when you have families in the
Yeah.
service, you have an even more patriotic view of the country and our armed forces. And then when you grew up during the GWAT, you know, we have a very. It's not like Vietnam where they came back and they were, you know, beating the crap out of vets. Like we had guys come back from the GWAT and they were heroes, and it was kind of a part of
Yeah.
wanting to be acknowledged and wanting to be a hero to somebody. And then also like that's what I saw as like being a hero and serving your country. So I was like, I need to go into the service, especially because I mean I joined in 2017 and it wasn't over yet, but we were winding down a little bit, and I needed to get my piece of it, and I
Yeah.
did get my piece of it. But yeah, it was a mixture of all those things that made me want to join.
Got you. So have you deployed before then?
Yes,
Where'd you go?
I went to Afghanistan in 2020,
2020. Oh, wow. Okay.
right before COVID
And
hit.
how long were you there?
Because of
Oh,
COVID, end of January through the beginning of December. I came out of quarantine coming back from deployment on Christmas Eve.
oh, wow. Oh, good Lord. I can only imagine what it was like. Okay, this is going to sound really mean, people, but I promise you it's not my intention. Afghanistan's a dirty country, okay?
It
It's
is.
a dirty country. It's not to say the people are dirty, but there are a lot of dirty people out there. Hygiene is not a thing that is at the forefront of people's minds. Obviously, in a war-stricken country, that's not going to be at the forefront of anybody's minds. But still, nonetheless, it was not. It's a very dirty country, and so I can only imagine being there during COVID, because that is just wearing a mask, and it's cold in January, February timeframe, and
Yeah.
then but I guess we weren't wearing masks till March, April timeframe.
End of February, beginning of March. Yeah.
As March and April come, so as those months start to come along, it gets warmer, and it doesn't just like, it's not a gradually it gets warmer. It's just like it went from cold to, hey, this is hell, welcome to it. You've been a part of it the entire time.
Did you go over there?
And so yeah, so I was there from 16 to 17.
Okay,
and,
where were you at?
I was at Ganbury in Fenty, so Jalalabad
Fenty.
area.
Okay. I know what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah. Where were you at?
I was at Camp Moorhead, up in the mountains above Kabul, and then I moved down across from HKIA on a little SF compound called Camp Griffin with the 160th SOAR. Yeah. So, but I know I had plenty of guys who were at Fenty, and God, there's so many different. They had so many stupid names. I never understood where the names come from, unless they were named after somebody, because then I apologize for that. But some of them had some
I don't
of
think
the
they
weirdest
were.
names.
I think someone just made it up.
Yeah, they're just coming up with just
They're like,
random names.
Hey, they had Dalkey, and I was like,
Dalkey.
okay, is it Donkey or Dalkey? And they're like, no, it's Dalkey. I was like, what the hell does that mean? Why that? Why make it complicated? Why don't we just call it Fob Donkey? Like, I would say be okay with calling it Fob Donkey if people would do that, but they didn't do that. And Dalkey is, let me tell y'all, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around it, right? It's just an airfield and some places, or some hangars and the main part of the base, whatever. But it mostly just an airfield. And let me tell you, that place sucks. Okay, you land there and you're just like, I want to be here for a shorter amount of period of time as possible. So like we took incoming while I was there for 10 minutes. I was only there for 10 minutes. Then we took incoming, and literally you can see all around you. Okay, like you can see from here to there, you can see it. Everything. There's no form of protection. Exactly, and you're just like, hold on. So they could probably see the person shooting this rocket right now, being like, look, we got another one. He's about to shoot it. And they're just like, hey, let's just press the button, incoming warning right now. Right. So anyway, they shot. We got down behind Hesco barriers. We're kind of like looking around. All these mechanics, these airline or the flight mechanics, they're not fazed by this at all. Right.
No.
They're just kind of like, you know what, man?
Another day.
We'll just figure it out. And if you've been there, after being there for long enough, you just kind of like, hey, if it's my time, it's my time. If it's not, I got to get this done by COB, because dinner chow tonight is about to be freaking awesome.
Yeah, I was just on shift last night, and I'm trying to sleep. So if you guys are going to hit me and not going to catch some disease, I was on shift for 12 hours last night. Can we 100%. Chill out?
Can we just give me like 24 hours? I promise I'll be up for this shit tomorrow. So yeah, I was laying down, man, getting down, because we had nowhere to go to cover, right? And just by some Hesco barrier. And so so those in the military, and I've told this story a few times. But in training, they simulate the whistle, and that means that's something over your head or whatever, right?
Yep.
I didn't think that was like real until I heard it
Yeah.
right above my head. And let me tell you, I had a puckering moment, okay? And I didn't get unpuckered until I landed back at Ganbury. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, that was like, it was one of those moments where you're just like, I'm good. Came, saw, done it all, man. I'm good. So yeah, Afghanistan was a crazy time, but I can only imagine being during COVID, because I imagine everything was just extreme, just extreme.
Well,
Just
and like you said, it's a third world country, right? So I think we had like their estimated infection rate, something crazy like 98%. So at some point, 98% of the country, to the best of our knowledge, had COVID in some capacity. And when
yeah,
you're trying to do things like joint operations, like we were with the 160th SOAR, where we were their QRF, supporting them, training the Afghans how to fly their Mi-17 helicopters, and you're working with the contractors who fix those aren't American. They're Romanian and Ukrainian, because they're Russian helicopters, and we can't read Russian to fix the damn things, but they can. You had so many, and then of course all the
yeah,
joint other forces that are over on HKIA that were about 30 minutes away from us. The Germans and the Aussies and the Brits and all those other guys, and the Turkish, like that also made it so much more complicated. And then when you shut everything down, and then you had like the peace deal that Trump signed with the Taliban that didn't last more than 2 weeks. Like, it was a weird time to be there. And then of course it was 2020. I had my cell phone, and we had those little shitty Wi-Fi pucks, and so I could get signal and like
yeah,
go on Facebook for the most part. That was the most I could get, because it was still bad signal. At home, it's the 2020 election, and then also unfortunately the George Floyd riots. So like cities are burning to the ground. People are wearing masks and standing 6 feet apart from each other because of this global pandemic. Joe Biden is now the president, and I'm over here like, hey, could the world just stop for a freaking second while I'm over here? Because this is way too much. Because I'm
yeah.
not home to help deal with anything. I'm not there to like try to process any of this, because I have to process what's in front of me, not what's going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, can we just stop for a freaking second so I can just take this all in, instead of having to worry about whether one of the Afghan contractors was coughing a little too much, and I'm like, great, now we got to quarantine the whole fucking compound. It was weird. And then we finally opened up to start operations again, probably the middle of the summer, a little bit later, maybe like August, July. And we were actually able to go out and do things
Mm-hmm.
and do our job, and that was nice. But after a few quarantines, a few very long quarantines with our group of guys, yeah, it was weird. It was a weird deployment, but it almost like it almost made it easier though, because I think if I was home and quarantined like that, I would lose my mind. At least there, like, I'm with my boys. Like I spent probably
Yeah.
more time playing darts in that span of like 11 months than I ever will for the rest of my life.
That is one of those things that you were like, you will do when you're out there. Well, no one will be able to go out there now, but if and when you, if you ever got the opportunity to go out there, you will find yourself doing something that you're like, when I'll go home, I'm never going to do this again. Like,
Oh, I've
and it's
never
just like,
touched
it's
a
not because I don't,
dartboard.
yeah. And it's like, it's not like because you hate darts or anything. You're just kind of like, yeah, man, like the feeling behind it, the emotions behind it will never be the same.
Yeah.
The feeling of joy or sadness that you get behind, say, throwing a dart, or for me personally, it's 11 o'clock at night, and having a conversation with the people that I was extremely close to.
Mhm.
Those, you'll never be able to have those emotions or you'll have those emotions, but those feelings, that nostalgia that kicks in when you just think of those, just the weirdly bliss place that you were in at the time, even though you could lose your life at any given moment, but you were still, it was still like a bliss. It was still like, hey, I wouldn't change this moment for the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
because the
definitely
next one wasn't
strange.
guaranteed. Like
Yeah,
here at
yeah, yeah.
home, like you and I can have this conversation, and I can say with pretty much certainty that you and I will get off this call and return to our normal daily lives. Whereas like there, you're in the middle of playing that good darts game, playing that game of craps or whatever, or having that conversation. You know that like, man, if their aim is just right, we could just blow up right now,
Yeah,
and that would be it. That would be the
yeah,
last thing we had, and you have to be content with that, and you're okay with that, and you find that solace, because not only are you feeling that, the other person's feeling that too. It's like
hmm
it's like equate it to like having terminal cancer and knowing it's your last day on Earth, and like
Yeah.
you can do all those things, but you know to come tomorrow it's not going to matter because it's going to be done and that's it. Like it doesn't take away the
Yeah.
meaning, but it's done. Whereas like you know, like I said, you and I get off this call, I'm gonna go have lunch. I'm just gonna continue
Yeah.
doing my leave and playing video games and wrestling with my son, and that's gonna be what I do for the next foreseeable future. There's nothing's gonna end it, barring the end of the Western world by nuclear disaster or something like that. So, yeah, it definitely is
Oh
like
yeah.
it's that overarching feeling, that weight on your shoulders that doesn't go away even after you come back. So yeah,
Yep.
it's an interest to
Oh
be,
yeah.
and that's that bonding and that like attachment that we have to each other, um, is like where people get that like depression from. It's not like the fault of our
Hmm.
families or our support groups back home, but like um, they can't give us that feeling, and it becomes almost an addictive feeling, and that's why you had guys like my grandfather who was in for so long. I mean, that man he'd come home from a 13-month deployment, maybe have 2 weeks to where he'd like, I'm gonna go golfing and mow the lawn and enjoy the things I missed. And then he'd be like, when can I go back?
Yeah. I didn't PCS to Fort Huachuca after, so I was stationed at Fort Hood, and then I deployed with 3CR,
Hmm.
and I was, they had a deployment coming up that they were going to go to Iraq that following year when I got back, but I had orders to report in November of 2017, and so I was like, I could put my orders on hold, if you will, and stabilize here, deploy with them to Iraq, and then come back from Iraq and then go to Wuchu, right? That was my thought process. I was like, I could do this. I was like, do I really want to do this? But then, again, I was having that thought in my head, and then sure enough, my wife found out she was pregnant, and so I was like, well, never mind. That has changed. I am going to PCS. So yeah, so that's kind of how that happened. So I definitely relate to that because even now, there are some times where going back to the Middle East and CENTCOM area to do that, I definitely kind of be like, I wouldn't mind going back. I wouldn't mind because I missed, like you said, I missed the bonds and missed the connections that you build. But sorry, guys, didn't mean to sound so depressing.
Yeah.
I promise.
No,
It's
yeah,
a good
it is.
it's a good
It
feeling.
sounds
It's a
morbid,
sad
especially
feeling.
for
It's a
those of
good
you who
feeling.
aren't in the service, but like, yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, it's a good
it
feeling.
was amplified, especially when the pullout happened, for sure. I know a lot of us were
Yeah,
like,
100%.
that you had a feeling of loss, and you were like,
Hmm.
let's go back. I don't care.
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah,
it wasn't even that we want to go over there and shoot people's in the face and like kill the locals. Like, don't get me wrong. I did so much. I don't have a cap. I don't have a
hmm
CMB because everything I did was treating locals, either from COVID or combat injuries, but not in direct firefight. Everything I did over there was solely for the benefit of the locals and good, and I'm so happy I did. So I promise, like when we talk about going back, it's not just because we want to,
yeah,
I mean, partially because there's some bad guys over there, right? But it's because like
definitely.
of the environment and the feeling we had over there and the connection, but also because we were doing a lot of good there. And once you see that
Hmm.
country for yourself in your own with your own eyes, you're like, yeah, some of the stuff they say is true, and the United States has done some bad things, of course, right? But we when we were there, we were doing so much for that country, and you're like, I can't believe we just said, all right, see you guys later, peace, and then it was like, look at us,
Yeah,
king of the castle, and we're like, I can't believe this
yeah,
happened. So
yeah. Because the Taliban they took over
quick.
really quick, and then we held it down to try to get all our people out. But obviously, everybody knows what kind of came of that. So,
Yeah, and even worse,
kind
especially
of
being in that
shifting gears. So
area.
when you were deployed, oh yeah, oh yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
like I had a friend. No, you're good. I had a friend, man. He was there. It was crazy. So the person that I knew before he left, um, because they were trying to get not anybody and everybody, but they needed support out there,
Yeah.
uh, and so he was CI, and he's like, hey, we need CI support, and he was like, this was the last time he could go to Afghanistan. He never deployed before, so he's like, "Yep, I'll go. I want to. That's I'm ready for it." So he went out to support that, to help out, whatever, and he he was there when that explosion happened. He was telling us the story, kind of telling his experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really morbid experience. And I don't want to get into details because it's his story, right? His experience. But I will say, the part I will say was, as he's telling the story, as he's talking, you could tell that you're looking at a whole entirely different person.
Yeah.
And he was telling this to a group of like 5 of us. 2 of us had already had deployed before, had been to Afghanistan. So the person that I was looking at, and my buddy, as he was telling the story, we could feel and understand the emotions that he was going through as he was telling that story, trying to, in a lot of ways, be a man and not cry about what happened, because he put hands on body parts to try to help as much as possible. And but you could feel it and hear it in his voice as he's telling the story, kind of telling us, like, I didn't know this was going to happen. He was like, I was on my way to that gate,
Yeah.
and
Abbey
then
Gate, which
explosion
I've been
happens, and
through about a
he goes,
zillion times and
yeah,
could
and he's like,
probably guess with pretty good accuracy where that bomb was. We used to drive through Abbey Gate to our
oh, really?
compound over to H Kaya to go to the PX to grab Lickies and Chewies when we were out, especially during COVID.
Mhm.
Like, we'd only get a trip like maybe once every 2 months
Yeah.
or so, so we go over there. But we drive through Abbey Gate, and what's funny is I can picture the gate, and I can picture the Garda World guys the contractors who were there guarding it at the time, and I can picture um, the little drainage ditches on either side, and I'm like, I bet you $5 I could guess with pretty good accuracy where that bomb was. And that's the crazy part too, because then you're
Yeah.
like, wow, I went through that gate probably 10, 15 times, and at any point that could have been me. And then also, man, why am I not there helping? Like, I know a lot of us. I know
Yeah.
he had a really heartbreaking experience over there, and my heart goes out to him. And I'm sure it's something he'll always have to work and live with. But like, um,
Yeah.
a lot of us who were there were like, when that happened, we were like, let's go. What do we got to do to go? Because now this is a problem. And we've been there, and those guys need as much support as possible. And it was a whole cluster. And then we're out, and now we're out, and who knows what the future holds.
Now it
Especially
seems we're going to go back
for
to the
you
Middle
guys. You guys
East.
are
So,
MIs. You guys are MIs. So like, that's not something you guys are fully expecting
yeah.
to experience too in your career. Like, I knew that was going to
No.
happen for me because
No.
I'm a medic, and I was with infantrymen. So like, I'm sure that was tough for him. But on the benefit is he has you guys to lean on, because you guys understand.
Yeah.
That sympathy is, and that empathy, not sympathy, that empathy
Yeah. Yeah.
is so important for guys like that. But, like I said, no
Yeah.
experience we have as humans is individual. Somebody's been through it, and the worst thing you can do is think that you're having that experience alone.
100%. And that is a true, one of the true statements I ever heard, because how many times you're a leader, and so you'll get this, and especially for my leaders, even in the military and outside the military, if you're in charge of people, you have people that are under you. um someone's new to the company, or you got a new soldier, right? And within 6 months to a year, they might be going through something, and they're this 21-year-old kid who does, still wet behind the ears, and doesn't still learning a lot, but still willing to learn a lot as well. But they start going through some things personally. They don't tell anybody, because they're like, hey, like, they wouldn't understand. They
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't get it. Oh, they've been in the Army for X amount of years. Their life is perfect. The way they talk about it, they wouldn't get it. They wouldn't understand. And not giving us a chance, and then sure enough, something ends up happening, and it all kind of spills out, and you're just like, hey man, why didn't you come to me? And they're like, well, because you wouldn't get it. I didn't think you would be able to help me. I didn't think you would want to help me. And you're like, nah, man, like, you wouldn't believe what I've been through. I don't sit here and try to tell everybody a story every single time what I've been through, but you wouldn't believe what I've been through. I know what other people have been through to help you. And so that's what I tell my soldiers all the time. I say, hey man, listen, you never know what someone's been through, and you never know what who in that room of safety can relate to you, or you wouldn't believe actually how many people in that room of 15 probably are going through the same exact thing you're going through, thinking the same exact thing you're thinking. but all it takes is one to say, "Hey, I'm going through it right now, and I need some help." So, um, but with you, were you married? And I guess you said kids in a year and a half, so didn't have a kid yet. But were you married at that time?
Me and my wife were long time. I had a long time boyfriend girlfriend relationship. And then when I got back, is when I
Mhm.
asked her to marry me. So we weren't married, but we did have a really strong relationship, and it was interesting to have to put her through that. Because everybody's always like the military spouses, like they go through a lot, and they do, but no one ever thinks about like
Mhm.
before that person becomes your spouse. Like my wife was my girlfriend, but we were committed to each other, and that's still strenuous on a relationship, especially with like not even just the time zone difference. She cares for me and she's worried about me just as much as a wife would. So but no, we
Yeah.
weren't even engaged yet at the time.
Got you. Got you. Okay. And so, how old were you when you got
We got married in 2021, so 3 years ago. So I was 22. Yep.
22? Okay. And so now you have a son, and what everything changes when you have a kid. And for a lot of people, they understand what I mean when I say that. For
Yeah.
some people who don't have kids yet, or whatever the case might be, um, you'll understand when you have kids that like everything changes. And for some people, good, some people bad. But I hope more good than bad.
Yep.
And it's not to just scare you or deter you from having kids, but it's to say like, everything changes when you do have kids. So what would you say changed the most for you when you had kids, or your son, I should say?
um Probably my ability to like look at things a little bit past. We have a saying in the military, right? For those of you who are in the military, you'll understand. For those of you who aren't, I'll give you the clip notes of it. So we have a saying, right? Focus on the 50-meter target, right? Your 50-meter target
Mhm.
is your closest target on a rifle qualification. So that's like you're focused on your the things that are coming up, right? Your 1 to 2 month out, important things that are coming up, and then you can adjust from there on whether you want to focus on the more important things that are your 150, 300-meter target. As a young man, even in the military, even though you're kind of trained to focus a little bit more farther out, you don't think about those 150, 300-meter targets, those things that happen in a couple of years, maybe a decade. And then once you become a father, you kind of think your thought isn't just, let me get this baby here and focus on, the diapers I'm going to change in the next 2 months, or how we're going to feed the baby. You're focused on that, of course, but you're also thinking like, what does this world look like when my son is an adult? What is the world that myself, my
Mhm.
generation, the politicians who are here now, the government that's here now, the state of the world, what is that world going to look like for my son, and what kind of world are we creating for my son and are each other's sons? And how is my impact or my choices going to impact that? So you know, like for example, like the last time I re-enlisted, it was right after my son was born. So I had to make
Yeah.
a cognitive decision to think about not just how that re-enlistment's going to affect me and my wife and our marriage, but how is it going to affect my son? You know what I mean? Is he going to be old enough where he starts school and then we PCS and I have to rip him from his friends? Things like that. You start thinking farther ahead. That's probably the biggest thing that
Yep.
changed, and that's good too because that coincided with my becoming a leader, and that's something you have to have when you become a leader too, is not only thinking about the here and now, but thinking about how it's going to affect everybody you're in charge of and you're responsible for farther down the road. So definitely
Yeah.
that clarity of being like, what's in the future, but then also like trying to balance the two as well, because you still have to be here and now. You have to be focused and you have to be cognizant of what's happening in front of you.
Yeah. No, I get that. Because it's funny because I wouldn't I so 2000, kind of going back for me, 2016, or no, January 2017. I'm 30 days, or I lied. What is it? About 45 days out from going home at this point,
Mm.
and I'm at a decision point, and I said, okay, I'm going to either stay in or get out. And for me, I had already mentally been preparing myself that I was getting out. My
Yeah.
ETS was end of 2017. I think it was October, end of October. Or no, I lied. April of 2018. But at the time, you could technically,
Yeah, you're ready to
they had
start
this program
taps and
for
stuff
like,
like that.
yeah. So I'm thinking like, all right, I'm gonna do Texas State Trooper. So I'm gonna get in touch with the people to figure out what I need to do to get in all that, right? But that decision, right? I hadn't really discussed it with my wife. I just kind of was like, yep, this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna for it. So I start doing the thing to get ready for that, and then next thing my mentor, he kind of pulls me in. He lets me know, he's like, really think about what you're about to do. He goes, because if you're getting out, he goes, there's no issue with you getting out. Do what's best for you and your family. But then he goes, really think about, are you ready for what comes next, and what getting out means? And I wasn't. I was not. Truthfully, I was not. I was 20. I had just turned 22 at that time, so like I wasn't ready. I spent my birthday in Afghanistan, Christmas in Afghanistan. It's like I was not ready for what comes next, getting out. But that decision I was making, I was just so like, I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do. And so he pulled me in. I had to think about it. Fast forward, and it's coming to that point. Like, am I going to reenlist? And I remember I was like, I have to talk to my wife. So I go home, and we had a conversation that day. We had a conversation the next day. We had a conversation for like a good 2 weeks, figuring out pros and cons, what we could do, what would be best for us, as far as me, my family. My dad's telling me I should stay in. My father-in-law is telling me I should stay in. They're both telling me, hey, you should do 20 years. The benefits, everything. This there's not a lot out here. Blase, both telling me I should. And then I'm talking to my wife thinking like, well, maybe I could, maybe I should, and whatever the case might be. And so it was a long conversation, because then it was realizing like, we're no longer making that decision for us. We're making that decision for my daughter there, and then our future kids.
Yeah.
So fast forward, and where like it's the decision's already made, right? I'm going to stay in until 20 years, or God forbid, fingers crossed, maybe I get but I'm going to stick. Look, everyone in the military always, don't let anybody fool you. There's a lot of people who, if they said we're going to give you a med board tomorrow, they'd be like, what do I sign, bro? I'll take this. I'll take it right now. Right? It's
Yeah, if you were like, here's 100% med board, I'd be like
85%.
Absolutely, you'd take that.
Oh yeah, right. And that's the thing. Most people try to hide the fact that they wouldn't, but they're liars. Okay, they would take it because they're like, "What do you mean? I got to do this? I can't do this anymore. I get a paycheck for the rest of my life." Absolutely, I'm going to take that med board. But no. Anyway, I just made the decisions made, but it was a hard decision because I was like, what does 5 years look like from now? What does 7 years look like from now? What does 10 years look like from now?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, gosh, dang, I'm thinking about it. And the only reason I'm thinking about it because I have this beautiful little baby that I'm holding, thinking, okay, this is a big decision, So like, I'm doing it for her. So it's weird. So I totally feel that. So with your with you and your family now, is your wife okay with you doing the 20 years, or is she like, are there sometimes she's like, what?
So like I've always said that. It was funny to get the kind of looks I got when I was like a really young private, and you get those like more senior specialists and sergeants who are like, what's your plans for your life? And I'm like, I want to do 20, Sergeant. And they look at you like, yeah, okay, kid. But I've been like that since the beginning. So even like when me and my wife started dating, like that conversation came up like, well, what's your plan? And it's like, I want to be in the Army for the rest of my life because I love what I do and I love my job. And the Army is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. We haven't necessarily talked about like, I don't think she's ever asked me to do that because she knows it's what I love to do. Because she's an awesome person and she cares about what I want to do, as long as everything at least jives together somehow. You know what I mean? Because she knows I'm going to take her feelings into account and how it affects her and the baby. But like,
Yeah.
it's never been the conversation of what do you think about getting out? It's okay. So what do we want to do next? Because I'm at that point right now where recently I've been thinking about like, what am I looking at for broadening assignments soon? Looking towards my 6 and like, what am I looking for broadening assignments? Do I want to be a recruiter, or do I want to be a drill sergeant? Or are there other broadening assignments that are a little bit harder to get, but maybe available for me as a medic that some guys can't get, that may be better for me in my career, but also good for my family? And right now, I'm currently looking at and going through the process of getting a slot for SFAB selection, because right now I personally think that that's probably
Oh wow.
one of the best, better for my career and for my family. I wanted to be a drill sergeant for a long time, but that's just, I
Mhm.
don't know if that's stress I want to put on my family. And that's that forethought of being like, I have to make these decisions for them, even though I can take their feelings into account. My decision affects
Mhm.
them. So like, what am I going to do that's not only best for me and my career,
Yeah.
but also, you know, doesn't hurt my family? Because that's important too. I don't care what, there's old heads who will be like, well, the Army didn't issue a family. I don't care. So what? I want my
Yeah.
family, and if the Army really wants to retain me
Mhm.
because they need me as one of the many numbers they have, then they're going to abide by at least some of my decisions. I'm going to take my control where I can, right? So it's never been a conversation
100%.
of, do you think you're going to get out? It's always, what do you want to do next? And then if I said, I think I want to get
Yeah.
out, my wife would be like, okay, so what's the plan? She's not going to be like, she's not,
Yeah.
she pushes me to the point where it's not, she's not going to just trust me wholeheartedly. And it's not because she doesn't trust me. It's because, she cares about me, my mental health, and what I want to do, but she also cares about how it's going to affect her and my son. And that's completely reasonable. So it's,
Yeah.
I, I don't think I'll get out, at least not right now, barring any death or my body, something crazy happening in the Army being like, listen, you're getting out and we're gonna give you disability, and I'm gonna be like,
Yeah.
woo, and then go on from there. But that hasn't happened yet, so we'll see.
Got you. Okay. All right. So kind of switching gears. So your son, what's his? If you don't mind, what's your son's name?
Atticus.
Okay. So I told you, and let's guys context. Before we started, I pressed record. He told me his son's name. I told him I was going to ask him. Right. Okay. Look, us millennials at times we name our kids some interesting names. Now, it's not to say your son's name is a bad name. I would never disparage your son's name. I think it's an awesome name, right? But I've met some weird names. Or I've met people that name their kids some weird names, and I'm just like, huh. That out of all these names, that's the one you went with, huh?
Mm.
Okay, look, it's you and your life, that's your family, go for it. But yours, kid, look, I think your son's name is awesome, right? Because it makes me. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Gladiator, and he goes and this is at the point where Russell Crowe's talking to, I guess, the new Caesar, if you will. New Caesar. Guys, listen, if you seen Gladiator, you know exactly what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. But and he's like, he goes, and he basically says, "Slave, hey, what's your name?" And he
Yep.
says his name,
My name
and
is
it's just freaking
Maximus
awesome. Like,
Deverilius.
great scene, right? So that is when you said your son's name, that is instantly the first thing that came into my mind. I was like, that's what it sounds like.
It's
So
funny that that's
with
what you
that, why did you
thought.
name your? I have ADHD, so my brain goes everywhere. I just
Well,
look, it
okay,
goes
so
everywhere. But like you said it, and I was just like, that's pretty cool. That's what it reminds me of.
So I heard your question. That's so I'll get there. So it's funny that that's what you thought, right? Because I'm pretty sure you're about the age of my
Mhm.
brother, my oldest brother. So you're a little bit older than me, but we did grow up in the same time frame. And it's not a gladiator reference, although it does sound like one of those like Greco-Roman names. In high
Yeah.
school, they have certain reading lists that you have to read, at least when we were kids, if you remember, right? There's a certain books that they make you read, like
Mhm.
1984 and Fahrenheit, and specifically
Oh,
for me, To Kill a Mockingbird.
yep.
And in To Kill a Mockingbird, for those of you who haven't read it, either youngins or people
Mhm.
who are too old to remember when you read it, the book is about a black man who was framed for the rape and murder of two young girls. And Atticus Finch is the lawyer of that black man. And at the time, it was still very racist in America. And he's one of those guys who, at the time, didn't care what color you were. The justice of the law is the justice of the law, and he deserves representation no matter what the color of his skin was. And he ends up proving him innocent in the book, and it's a whole piece on racism and early Americana. But Atticus Finch, the character, he's such a stand-up, I will do what's right no matter what the cost individual of a man that I knew if I was going to have a son, I wanted to name him after somebody he could emulate himself after. We were poring over names, trying to think. We had girl names and boy names because at the time we didn't know the gender. It was on the top of my list for years, even before I met my wife, because I've always wanted to be a father. And I said it to her, and my wife loved it. And she didn't even get the context. She's never read the book, but I did, and I
Oh
knew that
man.
it was important as a man that like your your father instills what they want you to be, some way, somehow, right? Either
Hmm.
by the way they act and trying to emulate your father, or teaching you lessons or whatever. And I know that no matter whether I do a good or bad job as a father, my son can look at his name, find out where it comes from, and go, "That's a man to emulate." And that was the whole reason I chose that.
Yeah.
And also, it's one of my favorite books. I love it so much. But yeah, it really impacted me as when I was in those formative years when my parents were going through divorce. I remember reading that book and like going like reading about this character and thinking like, that's a man. That's someone who stands up for what is right,
Yeah.
who's a hero, who always does he's that Captain America symbol. You know what I mean? He's that lawful good,
Yeah.
that he's stern, but he's strong, and he's kind when he needs to be, but he also can throw the fucking book at you if he needs to as well. And the court
Yeah.
scenes in that book are absolutely phenomenal. You want to talk about a book that'll bring you to tears by reading it. I don't read a lot of books anymore. I used to, but like reading that'll bring you to tears and to like give you a profound like sense of like aha, like that's some literature that'll do that to you. But yeah, that's where I got it from, and I absolutely love it. And it fits him so well. He's such a Atticus is such a unique kid. I absolutely love him, and that's not me like mincing words, so I don't call him something something inappropriate. When I say unique, I mean like I've never met a human being on the face of this earth, and I've met a lot thanks to the army. That is like my son, and it absolutely encapsulates who he is for sure.
That's awesome. Um, I don't have any sons yet, but when I do, I have my first son's name chosen, picked out. And for anybody who knows me personally, they know that I've had this name picked out since was it 15, 16 years old. And so background story, like for yourself, but for people who've heard this several times, me and my wife had been together since 2011.
Wow.
2011. And we were high school sweethearts, but when I first met my wife, it was in 7th grade. She was in 6th grade. But yeah, we've been together in a relationship since 2011. So very long time. We've been married 10 years this year in September.
That's
so
fantastic.
very long time. Thank you. So like it's awesome, right? But I remember, I picked this name out. So I'm very spiritual, very religious, and so my faith is very important to me. And as a young man, it wasn't as important to me because I didn't realize the importance of it. But still, it was a big part of my life because I was at church, whether it was student stuff, Bible study, and then Sundays, right? Because that's just what my family did. And I remember reading the Old Testament and the name of
Yeah.
and Elijah was one of the he's one of the top prophets. You know what I mean? If you're going to talk about prophet, Elijah's like one of the OGs. If you don't know, he was the one who he found fire, prayed for fire to come down from heaven, and it did. Context where when you read the Bible and you're just like, yeah, fire rained down from heaven, and his stand, if you will, that lit on fires because he was competing. They were like sorcerers. And they were calling on Baal, their god, and he was like in competition with them. And he was like, you have them call on their god Baal, and I'll call on my God, true God of Israel, and I will tell you, and we will determine who is the one true. Of course, God being the one true God, they called Baal. Those guys over there were calling to Baal. They were cutting themselves. They were doing some very descriptive, terrible things to themselves, just trying to get Baal to rain down fire. But Elijah, he's over there just praying to God, worshiping him, and he rains down fire. Now, not just like a little flame and whatever.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking like rain down fire. Imagine being there and just balls of fire coming down, and you're like, oh crap. Yeah, okay, we know who the one true God is there. So anyway, I read that, and the feeling that I got, I was like, yep, that's the son. That's who I want my son to be. That's the name that I want my son to have. I want him to have it. And so I don't have a son yet, but my wife knows, and she's known since we got together when we were young, since we were younger, that our first name, when we have a son, without a shadow of doubt, his name will be Elijah. So that is strong. I get what you mean when you said when you think of the name and the name sticks with you, and you're like, there's no ifs, ands, buts around it. That name is going to be there. So I get you what you mean, and that name that you gave your son is awesome and
Well, thank
impactful, and that's the name that we give our kids. Obviously, it's the name they'll have forever, but when it's the ability that they have when they know they have a strong name, the presence, and you're an NCO, so you understand this. When you walk into a room and someone will be like, "Oh, that's how it's like, man, hey, freak. I don't care what anybody else says. Don't mess with the guy. Okay, he's a cool dude. You piss him off. Listen, good luck. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
just the
absolutely.
presence that he has, that just to be able to walk in the room, and I know that with the strong name and the strong presence, it's so tied together. Man, you've created a strong man there. So I know and pray that your son's going to be an amazing man when he grows up. And based off our conversation, I know it's been he has an amazing father, has an amazing mother that's going to raise him right and lead him down a path of success. So that's awesome, man. But before we get off here, and we've taken and chit chatted up here for a while. Where can people find you if they would like, if you want them to find you, or if you have anything a place that people could go to check out some more, or check out any stuff that you have out there on the internet? Where can people find you?
So I don't do anything crazy on these accounts because they're my personal accounts, but it doesn't mean people can't reach out to me if they need anything or like just friend me on there. Facebook and Instagram, Devin Hawley, EvinHollie. You'll see a picture of my beautiful face on those accounts. However, if you're looking for something a little bit more less personal, I do have a TikTok account. I know this guy over here isn't too big on TikTok accounts because he's MI, and that's perfectly
No.
fine. I understand Chinese spies and whatnot. You can find me as Power Building
Mm-hmm.
Pogue on there. I do military comedy. I do comedy. Sometimes I do commentary on things that are happening in the military. Everything within DoD policy because I enjoy my career and would like not to lose it over something so stupid. And I'd love
Yes.
for anybody to reach out to me if you have any questions about the things we talked about, or I'm currently in Schofield Barracks, so if you're heading there, I'd love to help you answer any questions, or if you have just general questions, young NCOs, absolutely come and ask. People wanting to join the military, absolutely ask your questions. And go watch the rest of his catalog. I've been through a few of them, and they're fantastic. And if you're a father too, like I said earlier, no experience that you have is unique. Doesn't mean your feelings don't matter, but there's someone who's been through it, and there's someone to help guide you through it. Because as men, we can't be afraid to ask for help. And being a dad is such a unique experience.
100%.
You shouldn't have to be filled with worry and concern. You should be enjoying it to the fullest, and having that support group is the way you can do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate it. Hey guys, like he said, please go check out all my other stuff on Mediocre Dads on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, apps, and I think there's more, but those are the main ones. Those are the main ones that I go check it out. I appreciate it. And of course, please, if you're on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel, because the more subscribe, the better. And I think it's pretty cool to see more people subscribe to my channel and people willing to subscribe and wanting to see more of my stuff. So I appreciate that. But hey guys, that's all I got. Devin, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate it so much. And for real guys, his stuff will be in the description below. If you have questions, please comment your questions. Or if you want to hit it up privately, by all means, go check out my website, mediocredads.net, and you can hit me up. We can have a chat over there, and I have a conversation. But other than that, Mediocre Dads is, again, it's growing, and I appreciate it, all the love that you guys show me. But being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse to be mediocre